So, my name is Lloyd Pearson. As you mentioned, I work for the Samsung Open Source Group. My title is Open Source Metrics to Inform Corporate Strategy. I'm going to show you guys a lot of charts that I put together over the last year that we've been using internally to try and develop a better understanding of the open source technologies that we rely on. So, if you don't like charts, sorry. So briefly, who I am. I'm an IT generalist that specializes in open source methodology. So I have experience in systems administration, digital media, web development, marketing and outreach, and a handful of other areas. Currently, I'm the manager of operations and strategy for a small R&D team of open source engineers. And we have two roles. The first is to provide internal guidance to Samsung on the use and development of open source. The second is to actually be the representative in the upstream community. So all of our engineers contribute code upstream. So I've been using Grimoire Lab because Samsung relies on open source for pretty much every product they make. And of course, whenever you're going to invest time and money into any sort of software, you need to do a strategic evaluation to make sure that it's going to fit your needs. And when it comes to open source, it's not really enough to just evaluate it on its technical merits. You also need to kind of look at the community and understand, because that's going to have an impact on the strategic value of that software. Unfortunately, as we've seen, public information makes it really easy to do this. A couple of caveats before I get started. First is that quantitative metrics really only paint about half the picture. Really, they kind of just give you a starting point for where you need to actually do your qualitative analysis. And it's also relies very heavily on developers actually using tools in the way they're intended. So if they're using their personal email to submit code on behalf of the company, then that's going to mess the data, which there are ways to address that. But and also, it's easy to just spoof information like the commit date or your geographic location. So I'm looking at this from three major perspectives: community strength, internal strength, so how good our company is at it, and external project influences. And the examples will all be from these two projects, which is Wayland and X. They're two display servers. X has been around for a very long time, very mature. Wayland's kind of a new kid on the block, although it is getting a lot more mature these days. And the general consensus is that everyone is moving from X to Wayland. So I think we kind of get an illustration of what happens when one project transitions to another. So, community strength. Three components. Project velocity, so how fast is the project improving code or producing code? Contributor health, how successful are they at getting new people involved in the project, and how successful are the existing contributors? And then finally, developer ecosystem, so what kind of developers are there in the ecosystem? So this is probably the most simple chart we've seen. We've seen this quite a few times already this morning. The top one just shows you basic commits per month. The second one is a custom one that I created that shows you a year-over-year change in commits. So the blue line is just looking at this month versus the same month a year ago and what percent change that has. The red line is a 3-month moving average of that. So as you can see from Wayland here, it's been relatively flat, maybe a slight decline, but not too much to really be worried about. But as when you look at X, you can see not only is it a lot more sporadic and there's fewer commits, but the last 6 months have seen a pretty significant drop-off of contributors, which that could change, but 6 months is a relatively long period for development to decrease that much. And many more. So I'm going to be using Git for all of these examples, but pretty much any chart that I make, you can extrapolate.
Real quick question on your velocity. So you're actually doing it as a derivative. Your velocity is a derivative, so you can also start looking at acceleration after that, right?
Yeah, correct. Right. So moving on to contributor health. We're looking at new contributors per month. And the bottom chart on the left shows you cumulative contributors. So how many total contributors? And then this table over here on the right, it shows you the new contributors per year. The one thing that's missing is the contributors that become inactive. I just forgot to add it to that chart. So you could actually compare the net change in contributors year over year. And then looking at like X as an example, just to compare, not only are there fewer contributors coming into the project every year, but you can even see the last 6 months it's starting to flatten out a little bit, which is a trend that you want to keep an eye on. The top one is very similar to the first one with that commits, just showing you how many people actually contributed code in any one month. And then the bottom, once again, is showing the year-over-year change as well as the moving average for that change. And then just X is, it's kind of similar in comparing gifts. There's been a drop off the last 6 months, but things can change. And this is where the two projects really start to look different. So this is time to upstream. So the difference between the date a patch was authored and the date it was actually committed into the mainline repository. The top one is just tracking it for each and every commit, showing you the average per month. The bottom one is showing you when a person makes their first commit, how long is it taking them on average to get that code submitted upstream. So obviously, as you can see, on average it's taking about 2 weeks to get patches submitted upstream, whereas the median is about 2 days. And then X, you look at it, and the average is almost 2 months, and the median is 12 days. And when you look at the new committers, this is 100, can't really do it right here. This is 100 days right here. And you can see a lot of committers, when they first make their first contribution, it's taking them 100 days or more to get code submitted upstream.
And do you think, is that a function of the changing culture of people moving away from text to whatever W was? Sorry, I forgot. Or are you, Wayland, or are you saying that, did this number used to be lower, or is it like a difficulty of assessing code?
This is going back like 7 years.
Okay.
So I think it's probably just a matter of X is a much more complicated project, and I think a lot of people that have been there for a very long time. So it can be hard to get into a new community like or into an established community like that. So and then. Last one, they showed you this one earlier, but here on the left we have developers that have not contributed in the last 6 months, to sort this by commits. So the number one, that person had 319 commits and they haven't done anything in the last 6 months. That is a pretty good sign that they've changed employment and that their new employer does not have been working on that project anymore. So whatever they were contributing to, if you're relying on that, that'd be something to consider. Then on the other side, we have newest contributors, and once again, I sorted it by commits, just so you can see how how involved the people are that are coming into the community. So all of this is still a work in progress, and it seems like every time I make a new chart, there's 2 more that I want to make after that. So where I'm hoping to take this is to do a better evaluation of cross-pollination between all the tools. So say if someone send something to the mailing list, how likely are they to get involved on the review platform? And if they do that, and how likely are they to actually submit the patch upstream? As well as contributor churn rate. So if someone submits their first patch, what's the likelihood they're going to submit a second one, or a 5th one, or a 10th one, and so on and so forth. And then last part of this is developer ecosystem. So obviously this is very simple. This is just looking at individual contributors, sorted by top commits, just to get an idea of who's in the community. This is the chart that breaks it up by UTC. I think it's a lot more valuable to break this one up by individual and organization, because if you look at this, you might, if you didn't see all these individuals, you might think there's a whole large amount of people in Australia that are committing code to this, but it's actually just one guy. So if you were going to hire Australia, unless you're going to hire that guy, there's not as many developers over there. And then just briefly to compare it to X, one thing this can be useful for is you look here, UTC3, which is like Eastern Central Europe. There are no X developers, whereas in Wayland there's actually quite a few. So if you're looking to hire an engineer to support the team in that part of the world, check the public. That's something to consider, because you typically want to hire people that are in a, even if you're 100% remote, it's helpful to have people in relatively close time zones, because it gets harder as the further apart they are. And then this is one chart I spent many hours on this, had not figured out how to make it. So So I need basically a histogram on the commits. So you would have like one commit here, maybe 2 to 5 here, 6 to 10, so on and so forth, and the number of developers that have that number of commits. So it would say you have 30 developers that only did one commit, and maybe 20 that have done between 2 and 5. And this I think would be useful for when if you're looking to hire out of the community. It gives you a better idea of what the dispersion of expertise and talent is in the community. So if you want to hire a junior level developer, you're probably not going to be looking at the people that have contributed thousands of commits to the project. So the questions we're looking to answer in community strength. Is the community mature enough to support the products and services we're building? And if it's not, then how long is it going to take us to make it mature? So if X was not a mature project and we saw that it was taking 2 weeks to 6 months to get code upstream, then there's going to be a longer timeline in order to improve that project to where we need it. Is developer base improving or weakening? So are there more people coming in versus going out? What's the total number of new people that are coming in? And finally, if we need to hire any developers from the community, which my team almost exclusively hires from the community, do we have, or are there people that are at the level of expertise that we need? So internal strength. This is otherwise known as the slides we show corporate when we want to get more money. So time to upstream, once again, comparing our team at the top versus all other Samsung contributors versus the entire community. And you can see on average we're quite a bit faster than both of them. The important one I think is the median, so the 50th percentile. You can see more than 50% of our code is committed the instant the person writes the code because they are a committer or maintainer of the project. And actually you have to go up to about 59 percentile before you even see even a couple hours that it takes us to get code upstream. You can also chart this over time. And one of the things this is useful for, so like this spike right here, this is one Samsung developer that took almost 2 years to get this code committed upstream. And I actually asked one of our engineers, this is in Wayland, and he said that yeah, we know the guy's there. He always just dumps a bunch of code on us at regular intervals, and that while it may not be ideal, we at least can identify that as a thing that we need to be aware of. This slide kind of compares our team versus all other Samsung engineers. So the inside is our collective teams, the outside is each individual. So you can see we have 30 engineers that have worked for us over the years, and they have contributed about as much code as 500 contributors from the rest of Samsung. So this is a really good one to show when we want money. And then this charts it over time. So this goes back, we were founded just like a month or two before this, our team was. And it just shows you our various open source teams as a percent of all code that Samsung has contributed to these upstream projects.
A question on the previous slide.
Yeah.
Is this because these other teams are really mainly focused on getting product out, and so they spend less time upstreaming?
That is part of it, but there are still a lot of research teams that are included in the other Samsung teams as well. But yeah, that is part of it.
And your teams are more dedicated, aren't they?
Yeah.
To upstreaming?
Right.
And also, to your point earlier, you pick up people who are committers from the community,
right.
as opposed to training people to become committers, which really helps.
Yeah. Definitely.
But it's good. It's a good money slide.
It's a good place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go on. So the questions we're answering here. What teams have the most success at getting code upstream and which are struggling? So we saw the time series area chart where I was comparing each team over time. We can even look at specific product teams or research teams around Samsung. You can use Sorting Hat to actually add them to their own separate organization within your organization and track everything individually. How does our performance compare to the open source communities, the rest of Samsung? Who are our best internal experts, and who can we find that can act as mentors? In a company that's as big as ours, we have a lot of people that we don't even know that are contributing code. So it can be valuable to identify those people through a pretty clear metrics. Oh, and I was going to add, one issue we actually had at Samsung is we have one project in particular that we have a lot of people that contribute to it, and the product has changed a lot over the years. But and we have a lot of experts for the various subsystems, but we don't have very many experts that actually understand the whole project, which has created a lot of issues. And this can actually kind of help us identify people that have worked across subsystems in that project.
How do you identify all the people in the company who are involved in open source? Is that because they use their Samsung email?
Yeah, they're required to. And actually, I'll get to a little bit of that, clarifying that here in just a minute. So here we're looking at, so external influences. Here we're looking at, over time, this is 100%, which companies have, what percent of the total code has each company contributed to? In this case, this is actually the unknown category. And referring to your point, when you have this many unknowns, you can actually just Google search the individuals that are a part of that and figure out what companies they've worked for by looking at their LinkedIn page, and then just update their profile for, they worked for this company from this date to this date, and so on and so forth.
Because they're using their personal email ID.
Yeah, and some of these people are independent, and you can sort that out, but obviously that takes a lot more time. So comparing that like this to Wayland to X, you can see in Wayland, Red Hat pretty much dominates the code, but of course that's one guy. And X actually has quite a few more organizations that have contributed a significant amount of code. So it's just something to give you an idea of what companies are out there. And over time, who is building up and getting more involved, who's like maybe backing off on their contributions.
Do you see diversity of contributors as a mark of strength of a project? That they come from lots of different companies, not dependent upon one company?
It can be. I mean, it's like I said, this is where you start your analysis, and I think that depends greatly on projects. But I think if you have more companies involved, especially if you have competitors that are working on the same project, and that's a good sign that it's a company-neutral project rather than just being one company doing everything and controlling development.
Depending on what you want, in some cases, the important thing is to look whether you have contributors or collaborators from the market point of view, or maybe some contributors.
Yes.
So I think that there is not a simple answer. It depends on the business objective or whatever.
Yeah. It varies from project to project, right?
So this is basically the same time series chart we looked at, but in a pie chart. So on the inside, you have the companies. On the outside, you have the individuals that work for them. So of course, looking at Red Hat again, it's just that one guy, and they really don't get much code other than that one guy. So yeah, that just gives you an idea. So if this guy changes jobs, then whatever subsystems he's working on, they're going to lose.
He won't change.
Yeah, probably not. And then looking at X, so there's a little bit more diversity, at least in the top one, which is once again Red Hat. But you can still see, even in these smaller companies, they still are pretty much dominated by one person. This is unknown, so that's a little misleading. All right, this one we're going to get a little bit more confusing here, but I'll try to explain it. So the inside is the individual committers. So we're not looking at contributors here. We're looking at the people that actually merge the code into the mainline project. The outside is the actual commits. So this is one person right here that committed the code. This is the code that was contributed by a specific company.
Is
so
that circled by the size of the commit, or what's
it's just raw numbers, like counting the commits. Yeah. So basically what this is showing is your top committer is only committing code for his company, essentially. There's a small amount from another company, from a couple other companies that he's committing. But if you're looking to get code into this, there's a good chance that guy is not going to do it for you unless you're paying him. Whereas you can look at like the second committer and see that they've actually contributed quite a bit more code for other companies, and third and fourth and so on. Okay, and then this one, wait, did I get that right? No.
like
Oh, wait, this is, oh, okay, so I'm comparing Wayland to X here. So you can see the top committer in Wayland, or excuse me, X, has contributed code, or committed code for quite a few companies. Which, that can be a sign that it's a bit easier to get your code into the cloud. And then finally, my last chart, here we have, Wayland is actually, it consists of multiple repositories. So here you can look at where each company is actually focused on, like the specific subsystem they're working on. If you really wanted to get crazy, you can even break this down in files to look at who's contributing to what specific part of the program. You could even look at this over time, doing like the time series charts that I had earlier. And it just gives you, this is actually kind of a unique way to get competitive intelligence on companies that are working on technologies you might be interested in. Because you can look at, Red Hat is this orangish one, you can look at where they are contributing and get kind of an idea of what they're hoping to accomplish with it. And actually, I spoke to Enrique about this the other night, and how I think you mentioned you identified that Google was decreasing their contributions to WebKit, and it was right before they launched Flink. So you could have seen that, hey, they're not contributing as much, so they got something else going on. So from the organizational support perspective, looking at what companies are involved in a project and what specific domains of that project are they focused on. And additionally, are any of them actually changing their focus? Also, who sponsors the most important developers and maintainers? And are there any potential points of conflict with those people in power? So one of the projects that we're involved with, we had another company come in and start making, they were increasing their contributions to the project, and then they started trying to introduce changes that that actually favored their products at the expense of everyone else. And this can potentially help you identify if that's going to be an issue. Fortunately, since we have committers and maintainers on our team, we were able to control it.
Then how do you come up with which projects you need maintainers on and committers on? Is it based on? For us specifically, it's if a product team comes to us and says we need more influence on this project, here's some money, please hire developers, then that's how we specifically do that. So. Because their product is increasingly getting dependent. Yeah, and usually they're maintaining their own fork of it that has crazy amount of changes, and the overhead of keeping up with that is getting too expensive. So one final note, at the bottom of every single dashboard I ever make, I have a basic search that shows you each individual commit. That way, whenever you filter your dashboard by anything, like by time, by company, by individual, you can scroll down the bottom and actually dig into each specific commit from that, whatever your filters are. Just a random tip, that's really helpful. So, as I said, this is a work in progress, so here's my goals for the future with it. So the first is to improve corporate operations. So we want to improve the success of contributions upstream so that we can help reduce the code maintenance overhead. We can identify maybe product teams that could actually get more involved in getting code upstream rather than just trying to force it themselves. We also want to increase the influence we have on these communities, because often we have to push a lot of changes upstream so that the project can support whatever product it is that we're using it in. So this, can help us identify, the people that we need to hire, help us identify the best subsystems for us to get involved with. And then the last point on this is we just want to make sure we're getting the most value possible out of our involvement in open source software. And then, did you do studies which said it's better to hire a committer from the community versus groom someone from the inside who could start committing?
We haven't done any specific studies, but we're small enough. Our team is small enough right now that we can't really afford to bring in a newbie. It's something we want to do more of in the future. And like I was saying, the developer ecosystem stuff, we can get a much better idea of where the skill level is of the entire community, so that if we do want to hire junior developers, there's we can find something.
Right. And in some projects, you may be able to get away with a junior developer.
Right.
And in some you need to be.
Yeah, exactly. then lastly, we want to improve our strategy. So this is just simply a better way to help us evaluate open source software. And like I said, it also provides a very unique opportunity to do competitive intelligence, to just understand what other people in the industry are doing. And lastly, but not least, we just want to help Samsung be more informed about where industry leaders are going with their technology. So if you are interested, I do have a basic dashboard that I've created just that we show off publicly. It's on our blog. It's not really any special charts or anything. It's just what we do to create a little bit of marketing buzz around our open source contributions. So thank you.